Welcome to Gorham Community Access Television's presentation of the Civil War Gorham Connections. We are proud to bring you several short stories depicting the interesting roles many Gorham residents played in the war that saved the Union. Within this program, you will hear about Gorham soldiers who fought at Gettysburg, the pivotal battle of the war. We will also take a visit to the Gambo powder mills and hear about the contribution that company made supplying gunpowder to the Union armies. And along the Mississippi River, a Gorham son is involved in an unfortunate disaster that took place near the end of the war. You will also find out how the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln has an interesting connection to Gorham, as Lieutenant Merrill had a major role in the aftermath of the murder. We end our journey by taking you to the ceremony of the Civil War Monument dedicated right here on the campus of USM. We hope you enjoy and learn a few new things from the Civil War Gorham Connections.
I'm Major Mike Nugent. I've been looking through some old paperwork from the Civil War period, and I found several communications you might be interested in. Two young men, citizens of Gorham, reporting to the commanding officers. Headquarters, 5th Battery, Maine Volunteers, August 2nd, 1863. General, I have the honor to submit the following report of the part taken by the battery in the Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. The expenditure of ammunition and the loss in killed, wounded, and taken prisoners. At a few minutes past 2 p.m., July 1st, orders were received by Captain Stevens to change position from the left to the right of the seminary building and relieve Lieutenant Stewart's battery. The ground occupied was on the left of the Chambersburg Turnpike. We opened fire with spherical case and shell at 800 yards on the enemy advancing on our direct front. After they were repulsed, the guns were turned to the right on the columns advancing across the turnpike and marching to our left. And in the face of the most destructive fire that could be put forth from the 3 batteries in position, the enemy succeeded in dislodging the infantry posted in the grove. By order of General Wadsworth, commanding 1st Division, 1st Corps, the battery was limbered up and passing through the town occupied the knoll to the right and rear of Cemetery Hill, then holding one of the most important, if not the most important, positions on the whole line. A regular fire was maintained until dark to prevent the enemy from occupying the ground to the front. During the night, temporary earthworks by the direction of Captain Stevens were constructed, which proved on the 2 days following to be of the greatest service in covering and protecting men in pieces. Early on the morning of July 2nd, the sharpshooters, positioned in the houses and barns on the outskirts of the town and in the cover of the fences, began to be very annoying. While observing movements of the enemy toward our right, Captain Stevens received his wound, and the command of the battery devolved upon me. In withdrawing my left piece, the ammunition being exhausted, 4 of the 6 horses were killed immediately on commencing out of cover, and the 2 remaining, one died in harness 20 minutes after. I mention this that you may judge the nature of the fire to which we were exposed, and under which the pieces were served rapidly and accurately, as the ground testified the next morning. 19 dead rebels belonging to the Louisiana Brigade were formed in one small place. July 3rd. Early the next morning, engaged the enemy's battery again, posted 1,400 yards on our right, and for an hour and a half responded rapidly without any loss on our part, the earthworks protecting the men from several of the enemy's projectiles which lodged there. We then ceased firing, and with the exception of changing front several times during the heaviest firing while the enemy attempted to break through our right, the battery remained inactive, though suffered quite severely in the heavy cannonade. List of men killed, wounded, and taken prisoner. Killed 3, wounded 12, prisoners 6, ammunition expended 976 rounds. With due respect, your most obedient servant, E.N. Whittier, 1st Lieutenant, Commanding Battery.
The Battle of Gettysburg is thought by many to be the turning point of the Civil War. During the battle, approximately 44 Gorham residents participated to varying degrees, including 5 that gave their lives to save the Union. 2 of the residents fought in the 16th Maine Regiment, which was part of the 1st Corps and involved in heavy action on the first day. The regiment was positioned north and west of town and fought at the hinge of one line of Union troops facing west and another line of Union troops facing north. Because they were located at the hinge, the 16th Maine was a primary target of the Confederate troops. In fact, the 16th Maine was ordered to hold their position to protect the rest of the 1st Corps while it retreated. Because of this, approximately 235 of the 300 soldiers fighting in the regiment were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. Gorham residents giving their lives included Captain Oliver H. Lowell and Corporal William Cannell, Jr. 3 other Gorham residents died fighting for the 17th Maine Regiment, which was part of the 3rd Corps and heavily engaged on Day 2, south of the town in a famous part of the battlefield called the Wheat Field. This was one of the most hotly contested patches of ground ever fought over during the entire war. Approximately 15,000 soldiers from the north and the south exchanged control of the wheat field several times for close to 4 hours. By the end of the Day 2, however, the Confederate Army had retaken control of this part of the battlefield. Soldiers from Gorham giving their lives here were Ephraim Hicks, who was killed that day, as well as Captain Almond L. Fogg and Sergeant Cyrus M. Hall, who were mortally wounded and died the next day. Overall, approximately 8,000 soldiers from both sides gave their lives during the Battle of Gettysburg, while another 43,000 were either wounded or captured as prisoners. Gettysburg was and still is the largest battle ever fought on United States soil.
The Civil War period. Lester Laughlin and Edmund Fowler came from Southwick, Massachusetts, and built the mills on the Gorham side of the Passumpsic River to start making gunpowder in 1824. About 10 years later, the mills were expanded to the Windham side of the river. G.G. Newhall and Company bought the Gambo powder mills in January of 1855. They were improved further and expanded. Large orders for gunpowder came from Russia during the Crimean War, 1854 to 1856. This provided valuable experience for the employees for Civil War production. 3 ingredients are necessary to make gunpowder. You have to have charcoal, and it has to be finely divided, and then you also have to have sulfur. All of the sulfur was imported from Sicily to Portland. Saltpeter, otherwise known as potassium nitrate, was imported from India to Portland. The ingredients for making military gunpowder, the proportions varied slightly, but in general they were about 75% saltpeter, 15% charcoal, and 10% sulfur. When the Civil War started, India was a colony of England. England was strongly in favor of the Confederate States, therefore put an embargo on all shipments of saltpeter to the northern states. This would have crippled the North. Lamont DuPont was sent to England to negotiate the matter. He was successful in getting the embargo ended. Sulfur and saltpeter were shipped from Portland to the mills at Gambo by the Cumberland and Oxford Canal boats. These boats were about 9 feet 8 inches wide and 64 feet long. The boats took the gunpowder, the finished product, from the mills to Portland for further shipment. When the canals froze over, usually November to April, the transportation had to be done by covered wagons drawn by horses. On very rare occasions, with favorable weather, a canal boat sailed to Boston with 25 to 28 tons of gunpowder on board. All military gunpowder had to be shipped in wooden barrels, preferably oak, of 100 pounds capacity. Making gunpowder was an extremely dangerous business, which sometimes resulted in explosions. The worst explosion during the Civil War took place on July 7, 1862, when 3 men were killed and 25 tons of gunpowder were destroyed. During the Civil War, production at Gamville was very conservatively estimated as at least 2,500,000 pounds per year. After an explosion, doctors and undertakers in the area harnessed their horses and headed to the mills. A newspaper reporter stated there was usually business enough for all. The reason they were so anxious to be hired was they could get 50 cents a day more working for the powder mills than anywhere else. Many safety regulations were developed and enforced. Some included no woolen clothes, because woolen clothes in cold weather can generate static electricity and cause a spark. No shoes or boots with iron nails. They all had to be built with wooden pegs. No iron or steel shovels, hoes, or tools. They must use wooden wheelbarrows with wooden wheels wrapped with cotton. This gunpowder mill was among the largest 5 gunpowder mills in the United States for many, many years. It went out of business in December 1904.
This is a report from Frederick Speed, the regimental adjutant of the 13th Maine, written to the Maine Adjutant General, John Hobson. Ship Island, Mississippi, marked confidential, May 3, 1862. General, the 12th leave this morning for New Orleans. Colonel Shepley and staff go with them. The 13th, 14th, and 15th, 7th Vermont, and 6 companies of the 8th New Hampshire are all the troops left on the island. All the rest have either gone or are on board ship and will go today to New Orleans. In a few days more, all the rest, except 2 regiments for guard, will go. As Colonel Dow does not stand as a lamb of Butler, and the 15th are upside down, you may guess who stays behind. Colonel Neil Dow is head of the 13th Maine, and Major General Benjamin Butler commands all troops in the Department of the Gulf. It is well known that Dow and Butler have no use for each other. The 15th Maine, upside down, as Speed puts it, is demoralized due to the behavior of their command. I think that it's fair to say that Maine officers believe that Butler is prejudiced against Maine troops, preferring officers and men from his home state of Massachusetts. Maine gets nothing for Butler. The glory of the secret expedition will not fall to her lot. Through the exertions of Colonel Shepley, we have at least succeeded in getting the prospect of some new clothing for our almost naked regiment. A third of our men have no pants, and not 1/10 have whole ones. The 12th Maine is commanded by Colonel George Shepley, a former U.S. attorney, and recruited by General Butler himself. Shepley is able to work well with his commander and intervenes for the 13th Regiment. These remarks enclosed from time to time are not intended for preservation and are intended to meet your request for something informal. I am still in charge of Company I. Very truly, Speed. Little did Speed know that his message would be, in fact, preserved. After the war ends in April 1865, Speed is given the task of processing thousands of Union prisoners of war who are being released from Confederate captivity. Striving to return the soldiers home as quickly as possible, 1,800 of them board the steamship Sultana. The ship is heading up the Mississippi River, and her rated capacity is less than 1,000 passengers. On April 25th, for unexplained reasons, the Sultana's boilers explode. The majority of the passengers are drowned or killed in the explosion. Mr. Speed, at only 25 years old, is blamed for the tragedy. He is the only officer charged, and he is found guilty by court-martial. The verdict is overturned at a later date when it becomes apparent that all the information was not immediately available. After the war, Speed does not return to Maine. He resides in Vicksburg, Mississippi, becomes a judge, and dies there in 1911.
Here laid to rest is Lieutenant William Merrill, Company A, 5th Maine Infantry. The dates 1833 to 1918 correspond directly to the information available for Dr. William Merrill. During the Civil War, Merrill was a prominent dentist with an office at 344 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. On April 15, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater. The actor turned murderer, John Wilkes Booth, was on the run. Before dawn on April 26, Union troops surrounded Garrett's tobacco barn. Hoping to take Booth alive, the barn was set ablaze. The smoke was enough for Booth's traveling companion to surrender, but not the murderer. Booth was shot and dragged out. The paralyzing wound would end his life by nightfall. Booth's body was transported to the ironclad USS Montauk. More than 10 people identified the corpse as that of John Wilkes Booth. During the autopsy, scars on the neck of the body were identified by Dr. John Frederick May, a prominent surgeon in D.C. The doctor had removed a tumor from Booth and recognized his incision. A second confirmation of identity was offered by Dr. Merrill, the dentist. Merrill had restored 2 of the assailant's teeth with gold just days before the assassination. It is reported that Dr. Merrill pried open the corpse's mouth and positively identified his fillings. Clothing, the presence of a tattoo, and a break in the leg left little doubt that they had their man.
It is not that these men are dead, but that they so died. Not as if they fell by one of the 1,000 chances of this mortal lot which might happen to us all, but that they offered themselves willingly to death in a cause vital and dear to humanity. And what is more, a cause which they comprehended as such, and looking at it in all its bearings and consequences, solemnly pledged to it all that they had and all that they were. That is why we hold these names worthy of our commemoration. That is what gives to death a glory that life cannot wear. We are apt to think most of the battle as a soldier's trial. The shock and the clash, the hiss and roar, waves of blood surging beneath the waves of flame. the reeling lines, the broken ranks, the mad fever above the mangled slain. These are the pictures of a soldier's hardships which rise most vividly to mind. So one will bravely die to ensure these precious ends, not for himself, O glory of manhood, but for others. I hold it no less of an argument for a future existence, that a man will give his life for his friend when by that very act he loses him here forever. That one will suffer gladly that others may be free from ill. That one will die painfully that his countrymen may live happily. So unselfish, so little looking for reward, so trusting in the final good, so venturing for the brotherhood of man on the fatherhood of God. Surely otherwhere than here we must look for the just balance of things. Elsewhere and not here can we fathom the deep significance of patriotism and martyrdom. What I now claim is that this comprehension of the cause, this intelligent devotion, this deliberate dedication of themselves to duty, these deaths suffered in testimony of their loyal faith and love, make these men worthy of honor today. And these deaths equal to the lauded deaths of martyrs. Not merely that the cause was worthy, but that they were worthy. For human history is not a dead sea. It is a flowing river. There is a course and process of affairs, a development of society, rational and spiritual, moral and material, a slow but sure unfolding of the latent genius of the race, a destiny of man, a God of history. And what is whispered by the past, and what is thundered by the present, and what I see in the countenances of today, what I read on those sealed lips, I proclaim to the expectant future. Truth shall triumph.